Bluey is going to be the biggest licensing moment of 2027. I'll say that again because I want it to be on the record before the year even begins. Bigger than Shrek 5, bigger than Frozen 3, bigger than anything else on the 2027 slate. Those two are genuine contenders. Shrek 5 lands in June, Frozen 3 in November, and I wouldn't bet against either of them commercially. But Bluey is already the #1 preschool property in the US and one of the most watched shows in the world. Add a theatrical release to that and you're looking at the biggest license in the world getting a tentpole moment, and that is a different order of magnitude entirely. So today I'm focusing on all things Bluey as we start counting down to her movie premiere 12 months from now. I'm David Bourne and this is Born to License. Now, the timing of this episode isn't a coincidence. We're just under a year from the Bluey movie hitting theaters on August 6, 2027. And this past weekend was D23, Disney's big fan event held here in LA at Anaheim Convention Center. I wasn't in the room this year, but I followed everything closely and there was a lot to unpack. Now, you might be asking the obvious question, what does Disney have to do with Bluey? BBC Studios owns the rights. The answer is that Disney's relationship with the brand runs deeper than most people realize. And I want to go into exactly how that works later in the episode. But for now, just know that Bluey is one of the most watched shows on Disney Plus, and Disney is distributing the film theatrically. So when Disney throws a party for its biggest 2027 releases, Bluey gets a seat at the table. Let's start with what actually happened over the weekend. On Friday at the Disney Entertainment Showcase, the first teaser trailer and poster for the Bluey movie dropped. Bluey and Bingo playing keepy-uppy with a red balloon, the two of them racing after it in full 3D for the first time, and the crowd in the room got to see it live. Let's have a listen. Now here's my honest reaction to that. This wasn't the first time I'd seen a glimpse of this. I saw sneak peeks twice early this year, once at Toy Fair in Melbourne and again at the BBC Bluey event at Licensing Expo in Las Vegas. I learned a lot in those rooms that I still can't share today, but I'll tell you what I can share. I was a bit nervous. I knew Bluey and the family would be rendered in 3D instead of the flat hand-drawn style that the show has used for 6 seasons, and that switch doesn't always land. We've all seen 3D designs that didn't really work properly, but I have to say the moment I actually saw the animation, that worry completely disappeared. It looked incredible and they absolutely nailed it. Now the trailer drop was on Friday and something even bigger came on Saturday. It was the panel Bluey from the backyard to the big screen, and it was moderated by no one other than Nancy Cartwright. Yes, the voice of Bart Simpson, who is a genuine Bluey fan, and she made that clear from her opening line. A few moments to talk about from the panel. Creator Joe Brumm and series director Richard Jeffery walked through the origin story. Brumm animating the very first Bluey pilot at night after his day job, inspired by pushing his daughter on the swing and watching parents glued to their phones at the park. They actually screened that original pilot footage for the D23 crowd, which almost nobody has seen. Producer Amber Naysmith, who's worked on Happy Feet and the Lego Movie, talked about coming home to Australia to make the film, saying Bluey has set the bar for Australian content on the global stage. Brumm and Jeffery confirmed that 3D decision was a deliberate early creative call, not something forced by the format. They debated 2D versus 3D long before the film was greenlit and landed on 3D for scale and cinematic scope. And there was a genuinely lovely moment where Brumm said that if he could dream of anything for the movie, it would be a 4-year-old in a cinema row looking up and down at their siblings, parents, and even grandparents all loving the same movie at the same time, and for it to be some kids' very first cinema experience. Now let's talk about the fan reaction. It's been a bit split, and I think you should know that going in. A chunk of the fandom is absolutely thrilled. Plenty of people online calling the 3D glow-up gorgeous and saying it's exactly what a theatrical Bluey Bluey should look like. That kind of echoes my thoughts as well. But there's also a real vocal group who are unhappy about the move away from the flat 2D style that the show is known for. Some pretty strong language out there calling it one of the more baffling creative swings in recent animation. It's kind of the same conversation we had around Sonic's redesign a few years ago. But look, in my personal opinion, some people will always find something to complain about, and sometimes change is hard, even if it's a kids' TV show. I expect that criticism will fizzle out as people get used to the 3D animation, which is really just as nice to watch as the 2D animation in the TV show. It's just a different look, which I think is the right thing to do here to make it a proper theatrical moment. Now, I want to pull back a second because I think it's worth being honest about something. Preschool properties are genuinely hard to run from a licensing perspective. I put that question to Michelle Ahern, who ran licensing for the Wiggles in Australia at the absolute height of their popularity, and I asked her about the single biggest structural challenge of a preschool brand: the fact that your core consumer ages out in a matter of years. Let's have a listen. The other thing that's really interesting to me is that a preschool brand can be in and out sometimes because, what a 2-year-old will like, they probably won't be interested in 2 years' time. So there's this never-ending kind of stream of kids coming in and out of preschool properties. How did you maintain that popularity knowing that your main core consumer, you'd only have maybe 2, 3, maximum 4 years with them before something like the Wiggles would become uncool for, say, a 6 or 7-year-old, if I'm right in saying that?
Yeah, look, that is true, but it's also the opposite is also true in that the preschool age range is the only demographic of all demographics. It's the only demographic that is reborn every year and has the exact same needs forever. So what is developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old in 2025 was also developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old in 2015 and 2002. Whereas if you look at, say, what a 12-year-old is into now versus 5 years ago versus 10 years ago, it's completely different. So it's a demographic that is reborn every year. So even if you're just looking at the 0 to 4 or 2 to, it was 2 to 5 at the time, and I know now it sort of skews even younger.
And that's the trap that most preschool properties eventually hit. The audience just keeps turning over, and you're constantly rebuilding relevance from zero. Bluey is a bit of an exception, though. Most preschool brands are built for the 2 to 4 crowd, and they stop there. But Bluey isn't. Go back to what Joe Brumm said on the D23 panel. He doesn't just want a 4-year-old in the cinema. He wants that kid's siblings, parents, grandparents, all in the same row loving the same film. And that's not wishful thinking. Bluey's already proven it can do it. It's a Peabody winner. It gets serious critical coverage from outlets like The Atlantic that don't normally cover kids' TV. And there's a well-documented adult fan base that keeps watching long after their own kids have aged out. For me, I actually like watching Bluey when I'm on the plane. It's just a really nice way to spend the flight. So while every preschool license eventually runs into the same churn problem that Michelle has just described, Bluey was built on something most of them never do: a reason for the adults in the room to stick around too. That's a big part of why I think this licensing moment is bigger than a typical preschool tentpole. So let's talk about how this partnership actually works, because I think some people assume Disney bought Bluey, and that's not what has happened here. BBC Studios owns and produces Bluey in partnership with the Brisbane-based Ludo Studio. BBC Studios is financing the film and handling the licensing globally. Disney's role is distribution. Walt Disney Studios is releasing the film theatrically worldwide, and afterwards it will move to Disney+. That Disney+ relationship isn't new or incidental, by the way. Bluey has been the platform's biggest kids title for a couple of years running, and it's been the #1 most streamed show in the US across all of television for 2 years straight. So Disney isn't taking a punt on an unknown quantity by picking up distribution. They're doubling down on a title that's already driving enormous engagement on their own platform. That's a genuinely smart, low-risk way for Disney to get into the Bluey business without having to own the IP outright. It's also a great structure for BBC Studios because they get Disney's global theatrical muscle and marketing machine without giving up ownership or long-term licensing control. It's really a true win-win partnership. Now, when you combine the world's biggest license with a theatrical release, you get a lot of market activity. I'm telling you, come August next year, Bluey will be absolutely unavoidable. So this is probably a good moment to draw out a distinction I think gets muddled a lot, even with people in our licensing industry. The difference between a licensing partnership and a theatrical partnership. When you take the biggest license in the world and you give it a big theatrical moment, you're going to see a lot of licensing partnerships and a lot of theatrical partnerships too. A licensing partnership is what most of this podcast is about. A licensor granting a manufacturer or retailer the right to put the IP on a product in exchange for royalties, usually with approvals built in at every stage. That's Moose Toys making Bluey playsets, or Lego making Bluey Duplo sets. Long-term, category-specific, product-led. A theatrical partnership, on the other hand, is a different animal entirely. That's when the theatrical distribution team, in this case Disney, brings on partners to help them market the film. Their key focus is finding big advertisers who will spend big dollars on promoting the film in a partnership. For example, a car brand doing a commercial starring Bluey and her family with a big call to action. Often the advertising material will include a snippet of footage from the movie, and there will usually be an end card saying coming soon or only in cinemas. Expect to see both running at full speed simultaneously come mid next year. A lot of great licensed products on shelves and a range of big theatrical partnerships too. Now, I want to end on something a little more personal before we wrap up. Those that can hear my accent will pick up that I am Australian, and every time I hear that unmistakable Aussie twang come out of Bluey or Bingo or Bandit, it genuinely makes me proud. There's something about hearing your own accent carried around the world by a kids show that really hits quite differently. And here's my prediction. We are about to see a generation of kids around the world starting to speak with an Australian accent, the same way an entire generation of toddlers picked up bits of a British accent from watching so much Peppa Pig. And that's not a small thing, it's a cultural export at the deepest possible level. It's not just toys on a shelf, it's how millions of kids learn to talk. One more thing before I let you go, we have a Born to License client launching their first ever Bluey collection soon, and we could not be more excited about it. Over the years, we've had clients launch products alongside some of the biggest and hottest brands in the world: Spider-Man, Hello Kitty, SpongeBob, Stitch, Batman, but we've never had a Bluey launch on the books until now. More details on that soon. Watch this space. I hope you've enjoyed this Bluey-themed episode of the podcast. I'll have a lot more to say about the brand as we get closer to the film release in August next year. I'm David Bourne, and this is Born to License.